So first of all, I think when we do talk about social media, the few social media platforms that comes to all of our mind, I think, is Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and things like that. But the truth is that the world of social media, or the landscape of social media, is much larger than the top five, six, seven names that we can actually think about. And the reason I just actually put up this particular slide is that and social media covers a much larger diaspora, right from games to discussion networks, microblogging and live casting and things like that. But what we generally look at a lot more around is, if you think about social networks, then companies like LinkedIn and Facebook and Arcot and others actually comes into play. When you look into publishing, social media platforms like Wikipedia and others come there. When you think about actually sharing information, be it around videos, be it around pictures, etc., social platforms like YouTube and Snapchat and others, come. So I mean, it is just basically to be cognizant that there is a lot more than the five or six which we believe are the popular social media ones. So what I want to just basically bring the attention to is, if you can actually see the top right hand corner of the screen, this is actually just a snapshot of what we have actually seen just in the last 12 months. I mean, this is obviously our population actually increased by about 1%, about 81 million. But the interesting statistics is that the increase in unique mobile users is close to about 100 million. Unique net users is close to 300 plus million people are using this, and more than very close to 500 million people who are very active social media users. So we are actually talking about a very large proportion of humanity who are actually using social media today. And then when we actually do a little bit of a deep dive into how social media is actually being used, right? Out of the 4.2 billion people who are active social media users, very close to about more than half of people of the global population, which is about 4.2 billion, that is about 53.6% of the people use social media. And within that, when you actually dive into more information around it, you see that close to 500 million of people are active social media users. And what is actually telling in that is, of the 98.8% of them actually access social media through mobiles. Okay, so that has become the power of not just the smart devices like your iPads and other things, but mobiles have actually become a key part of how we live. It is part of our lifestyle, so it's just showing, the statistics is just showing that the growing usage of it. But what is also telling is, when you actually think about, on the bottom right hand corner, you can see, when you think about the various social media platforms like Facebook or WhatsApp and Instagram, which are all very popular, right? I mean, Facebook Messenger, etc., took anywhere between 5 to 6 years to get about 500 million active users, or 500 million, sorry, 500 million active users. But then actually look at other social media which has actually come lately. Like, I mean, they have actually been around for maybe the last 3 to 5 years. It has taken them less than about a year to 18 months to get the same number of registered users as we have had in, let's say, as it actually took a Facebook or a WhatsApp to actually get the 500 million users. So I think the message on this is, I think social media is there to stay. Social media is extremely popular. More than half the world's population actually uses it. Smart devices are actually being a core part of delivering this and providing the access to a large percentage of the population. There are I mean, this is just to actually give a view of pros and cons of social media. And there has been so much of information and so much of research that has actually been done that you can actually say, okay, if I want to actually look at posting pictures, depending on what you're actually posting, whether Pinterest is the social media that you should actually go for. If you are actually following certain trends that are happening, should you be actually looking at Twitter? And then there is enough and more information which actually tells you what's good and what's not so good about that particular social platform or the social network which is there. So there isn't any one single thing which is actually good for one or bad on certain parameters, right? So there is enough and more information available for that. And I think the message here is, because there is a plethora of social networks, I think it's important for people to access the right one for the right parts of the information. Either they're actually trying to source, or ones which they would want to actually blog or share with either the circle of friends, relatives, or the larger community. If we look at then, okay, so we have all of this stuff, and then, generally when you actually group into, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, and, or Gen Ys are millennials, etc. So what has been the motivations, right? So what are the motivations for using social media? So, I mean, here there are about 10 reasons to the top left of your screen, which has been saying, to stay in touch with friends and family, getting news and current events, sharing photographs, sharing your opinion, sharing your stories. Obviously, online buying is very big. So how do you actually research it? Today, people, though there is a lot of impulsive buying online, I think people look for reviews. People actually look for, social confirmations on products that they're actually researching to actually buy the particular product. So social media actually has got that, the powerful, notion of what generally a particular age group or a population is actually looking at. So when we then actually look at, okay, so how does how does the social media users by generation actually look at it? And very clearly the digital natives, which is basically your millennials, which is Gen Y, and of course Gen Z. Very large percentage of them actually use social media, while it actually gradually decreases with baby boomers, as it actually goes down to baby boomers. The bottom right graph there, there's a lot of information over there, but I think what it's trying to actually say is, amongst these age groups, what are the different interests? What are the different motivations, I guess, for different age groups to actually look at it? And an interesting statistic is, I don't know whether people can see my cursor, but if you look at this one here, in terms of actually, staying in touch with what my friends are doing, it is fairly consistent right across the age group. I mean, so roughly about 37 to 40% of the people within that age group actually use social media to do that. But then what is also interesting is the different age groups use social media for different things, right? So, some observations are, if you actually look at the Gen Z and millennials, who are, for practical purposes, digital natives, a very large percentage of them actually use social media to actually fill spare time. I mean, it is an alarming statistic, that the 50% of them are actually doing that just to keep themselves busy because they don't know what else to do. Versus when you actually look at staying in touch with friends, keeping themselves up to date on news and current events, etc. That kind of actually fades away on Gen Z and millennials when it actually comes to the social networks, while the Gen X and baby boomers, who are not digital natives, but they have actually been used to using the digital platforms for news and current events. That is still the case. A very high percentage of them use that for it. So when we actually go through the next pieces of information, I think it's important to understand why there is a lot more impact of social media and networks on the Gen Z and millennials. And it is it is telling because, as you can see, some of these categories are highlighting it. But is it all good? Is it all bad? We can actually have a very kind of a quick look at that. So one is, I mean, if you actually think about, okay, so what's good about social media? And I personally believe for a very majority of people, I think social media and technology offers us, fantastic convenience and connectivity. Of course, being, connected, staying connected to friends and family, especially now during pandemic. I think it's great that social media platforms allows us to actually keep in touch. Obviously, quick information, access to information, education and learning, right? So, I mean, it is last 18 months, most of the students, either primary school, high school, or even university students, are learning through remote learning, and there is no really on-campus learning. So, social media and technology are basically the fabric on which this is happening. The civic awareness and engagement. I think we all of us know the positives and negatives of this, right from influencing U.S. elections, right through the awareness and engagement that happens, for fundraising and social awareness and things like that. Of course, the creativity part of it, relieving boredom. I mean, I think that's also important, right? So, whether, streaming is a very, very big business today. And that is one of the, social network platforms which has actually really taken off over the last 18 months. Because obviously, there are no opportunities for people to go to movies. And at the comfort of their lounge, they have access to a huge amount of content. So I think, I mean, we can keep going around the goodness of social media, and how it has got a positive impact on the on the population. But then when we actually look at a very heavily talked about and debated thing is around what has been the impact on social media, especially during pandemic. I guess, while I was actually researching this, one of the things that I would, say is like the economic impacts of lockdowns are for us to see. I mean, it is very, visual because it is actually talked about. There's a lot of conversation of that in the media. However, what's actually less obvious is the damage to people's mental health, right? The anxiety that has actually created over this issue. And coupled with the economic impact and the social isolation, I think it's a perfect storm to fuel significant and long-term mental health issues. So, some of the statistics here, I think, actually supports that statement by Petre, and if you look at it, the social engagement has increased by over 61% in the last 18 months. There has been 40+% increase in usage, especially 35-year-olds or below 35-year-olds are on social media apps. So what has the pandemic also kind of contributed? There's a negative effect around the lifestyle behaviors for most of us, over the last 18 months, especially where we have actually experienced a lot of lockdowns and things like that. The physical inactivity, unemployment, unhealthy, diet behaviors. I mean, there's no time for people to go out to exercise, etc. Plus, I think also what's very important is the increase in technology all time. And this is like, I mean, every waking hour, a very large proportion of the waking hour people are actually spending on technology. So how has that impacted, right? I guess, the negative impact of social isolation, of usage of extreme technology, time spent on it, is around low mental well-being, and there is an increase of that. Obviously, there is self-esteem and feeling dissatisfied about it because of job loss, because of actually being at home, developing depression, and that has actually gone up, and the psychosocial support that is actually required. Just to give you some statistics, just to get a feel for what's actually happening, right? So if we look at Victoria itself today, 33% of the Victorian population today experience depression and anxiety. And this is during the pandemic, and it has actually got a direct correlation to the number of lockdowns that has happened in the state, right? And this is compared to about only 18% in other states. The volume of calls to Lifeline has gone up by about 18%. Volume of Kids Help has gone up at about 10%. Beyond Blue, which is another organization, sister organization of Mental Health Foundation Australia, has gone up by about 30.7% in the last 18 months. We see that 1 in 3 young adults who are actually displaying very high levels of psychological disorders, compared to only 18% in the age group of 35 to 65, or less than 10% on those who are 65 and above. And some of these statistics actually goes back to what I linked in before, as in, if you look at the Gen Z and the millennials, the way they are actually using social media is, to take away boredom, to actually just, look for things because they have time on hand, etc. I think, we can see that there's a correlation of why the increase in mental health well-being is felt more in the Gen Zs and Gen Ys. When we actually then move forward to see, okay, what is the impact of social media, right? So on the left hand side, you'll see a huge amount of information around the statistics of this, right? So 95% of teenagers experience cyberbullying, right? 33% of the teenagers who use social media experience cyberbullying. More than half of the people basically say that they experience negative behavior due to unfair comparisons. It almost has become where, especially for the millennials and the digital natives, living life is actually about living life in the public domain, right? Which basically feeds into becoming anxious, becoming stressed, because they are actually constantly looking for feedback from probably people they don't even know. The number of likes, the number of comments that you actually get on social media basically gives that dopamine effect. But at the same time, you actually can go into a negative spiral if you don't receive as many likes as you would have expected or as a peer of yours actually had got. And from a very young age, we actually see people needing to actually, build these personal brands, and seeking actually validation and confirmation through social media around it. So so living in this, living the life in a public domain actually has negative impact around anxiety, depression, etc. I mean, I've just listed a couple of I guess mental disorders that has actually come about ever since social media has actually been extremely has been actually taken up. The selfie syndrome, right? So we see that, and this is basically what it means is that it actually is tied to a narcissistic kind of a mental disorder, right? So where you're almost not conscious of people around you. It is all about you. It is about your selfies, posting those onto it, and it is really driving narcissistic behavior. And there is research to show there is a direct correlation between social media and the narcissistic behavior, especially in men, and that's kind of called as selfitis or the selfie syndrome. Another behavior which has been highlighted through the social media is what's called as a shiny object syndrome. So this is where I think one of the downsides is the span of attention, where the shiny object syndrome is about not necessarily finishing anything that has actually been started, or not necessarily investing time in any one thing, but keep running to things which seems to look good, And social media, just fosters that behavior of actually going for new things all the time, which has issues around delayed gratification. It has got anxiety of performance, and all these other impacts that we actually see. So, I mean, we did talk a lot about it. And if we just actually, hone in on, okay, so what are the kind of, not so good about the social media? I think, we've spoken about depression, anxiety, loneliness, and even suicidal thoughts. And a lot of this, right? So, and it's a vicious cycle. It's a negative cycle, and basically in eroding self-esteem, especially which further triggers anxiety. So fear of missing out. I think this is a classic case where especially teenagers who feel that they believe that others may be actually having fun, and the fear of missing out, they don't want to do it, and hence they become active users of social media, even though they don't see a need for it. It increases the feeling of loneliness. I mean, this is an oxymoron. The entire reason of social media, like the Facebook and others, is about being connected. The physical distance shouldn't matter. How do you actually increase social interactions? I think that's really what the platform was supposed to provide. But I think the truth is that there is increased feeling of loneliness and isolation, which then has got other impacts around depression, etc. And we did talk about self-absorption. We talked about the self syndrome over there. So what are some of the behavioral leading indicators? So, I mean, if you would want to actually kind of understand, maybe there is an issue of, either your own child or your peers or your friends. I mean, there are some very classic behaviors through which you could actually pick, okay, maybe there is something wrong, or maybe something is not right. Being, symptoms of anxiety, suffering from sleep. If people have got this deteriorating attention in waking hours, you can actually look at that. And there are some who would want to actually engage in very risky behaviors, right? So, I mean, it could be, risky behavior is not basically taking risks in work or taking risks, but playing pranks, which can actually go horribly wrong. Defaming, friends and peers, comparing oneself against everybody else who's there in the social media, and many a times people don't even know where the truth lies of what has actually been put out in social media. So I think these are some of the leading indicators that we actually see, and it's worth actually just keeping at the subconscious to identify this, either for yourself or for the peers. And when we actually look at this, so how can parents, kind of support kids, in terms of social media usage? I think there is enough research to show that parents who themselves are constantly checking their phones for texts and email and social media updates, I believe, are more likely to have kids who, misbehave, than people who can actually just step away from the screen, right? So, I mean, this is research which has actually come out. Similarly, I think the parents themselves could actually have social media addictions. I mean, we did see, especially for Gen X, and some of the Gen Ys, they are also actually victims of social media and the impact on mental health. So how do we, how does the parent actually, help the kid? One is, of course, educate, yourselves on, popular social media sites, how digital native kids are actually using those. I mean, is there a better way to actually use social media? Because there are definitely, a lot of positives around social media, as we actually saw earlier. Building a relationship of trust. I think constantly having conversations on all of these topics, which you believe are trending, the good, the bad parts of it, etc., and having open discussion on, okay, what platforms the parent is on, and what the parent is actually finding, the positive things or the good things or things that might be actually helping them in their daily life or at work, etc., and sharing that with the kids, so that they do actually look at the positive aspects of social media. And I guess, as the saying is, the technology has changed the way we live, work, and socialize, but it cannot actually replace parenting. So there is an amount of responsibility on the parent around this. Like, I mean, some of the tips, around the social media usage, pick a time at night after which you will not check phone. I mean, it could be 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, whatever whatever is your sleeping pattern, whatever is your regular routine. I think it is, it'll be good to have that kind of a discipline. Using an alarm clock instead of the phone. There is basically, there is the, when I was talking about selfie syndrome, and I was talking about the shiny object syndrome, there's basically the vibration syndrome, where people, just wake up halfway through the night thinking that their phone is vibrating, and they don't want to miss out on a message or whatever else it is. And that's actually causing a lot of sleep deprivation and things like that. Taking a detox, I don't know, 1 day a week, may be difficult, I don't know, half a day a week, or maybe X number of hours during the day that you would not actually touch the phone, or you won't post messages, you won't look at messages, etc. Turn off notifications, in the night, when, eventually, when, at some point, because there's no point having those things during the night. Taking breaks, etc. I mean, I think there are multiple things, and which we can do to, I guess, reduce the social media usage. Because I think, there is enough research that shows that, people who actually have reduced social, not necessarily quitting social media, it doesn't make sense. I mean, we saw the statistics of half the humanity actually uses social media, and there's a lot of good on it. It's not about quitting, but it's about basically regulating oneself around it. And feeling that you have actually taken control of your life. Look, finally, at the end of the day, like money, money is not good or bad. It's basically what we actually, how we actually use it. Similarly, while on the picture on your left shows that there are many positives on social media in terms of self-expression, self-identity, emotional support, access to information, learning, etc. Obviously, there are others, which are not so good part of it. But from a person's mental health and well-being, I think it is directly related to how we use social media, how much of it we use it. And to some degree, I think all of us, get, I guess, confidence through validation and confirmation. But then you need to actually look at, are you actually getting those things from the right group of people? I think key is to enjoy the benefits of it while being very much aware of the downsides to it. And the last sentence is a cliche, but we truly can't live without social. The right choices in the right amounts will keep us healthy and satisfied. So anyway, so this is kind of what I wanted to share today. And this is a very vast subject, and hope I could do some justice in actually covering all angles of it, and giving a very high level view of the impact of technology and social media on mental health.